The Tunisian armed forces consist of the Tunisian Army, Air Force and Navy. As of 2019, Tunisia had armed forces with more than 150,000 active duty personnel, of which 80,000 were conscripts. Paramilitary forces consisted of a 12,000-member National Guard. Tunisia participates in United Nations peacekeeping efforts in the DROC, Somalia, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and the 1960s mission in the Congo, ONUC. The former Minister of Defense was Rachid Saber. The modern Tunisian army was formed in 1831 by Al-Hussein II ibn Mahmud. During the period of the French Protectorate, these units saw active service in Europe during both World Wars, as well as in Indochina prior to 1954. The only exclusively Tunisian military force permitted under French rule was the Belishal Guard. On June 30, 1956, the Tunisian army was officially founded by decree, in the form of a combined arms regiment. The necessary equipment was made available to the young state from French stocks. The new army initially comprised 25 Tunisian officers, 250 NCOs and 1,250 men transferred from French army service, plus 850 former members of the Belishal Guard. Approximately 4,000 Tunisian soldiers continued in French army service until 1958, when the majority transferred to the Tunisian army, which reached a strength of over 6,000 that year. Intakes of conscripts for military service, made mandatory in January 1957, plus the recall of reservists allowed the army to grow to 12 battalions numbering 20,000 men by 1961. 60% of those troops were deployed for border monitoring and defense duties. Tunisian units first saw action in 1958 after French intrusions into the south in pursuit of National Liberation Army fighters. In 1960, Tunisian troops served with the United National Peacekeeping Force in the Congo. 1,020 troops from the Tunisian armed forces were amongst the first UN troops to arrive in the Congo. By the 20th of July 1960, in 1961 clashes occurred with French forces based at Bizerte. More than 600 men fell in battle against the French forces. The French evacuated the base after subsequent negotiations with the Tunisian government. The Tunisian Navy, founded in 1958, received its first ship in the fall of 1959. The Air Force acquired its first combat aircraft in 1960. While the Tunisian armed forces obtain equipment from several sources, the United States remains the largest single supplier. Officer and specialist training for Tunisian personnel was formally undertaken in French and American military academies. Tunisian trainees are now gradually being assigned to newly established military schools within the country. The January 10, 1957, a law prohibits any military officer to be a member of a group or a political party. However, after the 7th of November 1987, when the former Prime Minister, General Zine El Abidine Ben Ali took power, senior officers such as Abdulhamid Sheikh and Mustafa Bouaziz took up ministerial appointments. On the 30th of April 2002, at around 18.15, the direction of the army, Brigadier General Abdelaziz Skik, who led the Tunisian contingent to Cambodia, 2 colonels majors, 3 colonels, 4 majors, 2 lieutenants and a sergeant major, disappeared in a helicopter crash near the town of Medjez El Bab. Tunisia has contributed military forces to United Nations peacekeeping missions, including an army company to the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda during the Rwandan genocide. In his book Shake Hands with the Devil, Canadian Force Commander Romeo Dallaire gave the Tunisian soldiers high credit for their skills and effort in the conflict and referred to them as his ace in the hole. During the 2011 Libyan civil war, Tunisian forces, mostly border guards, saw some limited action when fighting between Libyan rebels and loyalist soldiers spilled over the border. The Library of Congress Country Study says, his exclusive power to promote military officers has been among the strongest components of Bourguiba's control over the armed forces. From independents, high-ranking officers, general staff and senior commanders in particular, have been carefully selected for their party loyalty more than for their professional experience and competence. This began in the late 1950s when the president dismissed those officers who had trained in the Middle East and who might therefore have been expected to sympathize with the militant pan-Arab policies of Egypt's Nasser. The hand-picked senior officers, in turn, carefully screened all officers who were considered for positions of authority in line units to ensure that anti-regime elements did not pose potential threats at any level of the military establishment. As a result of these promotion policies, the Tunisian officer corps took on a very homogeneous character that only began to break down in the 1970s. Senior officers have been generally representative of Tunisia's economically and politically dominant families from the north, the coastal areas, and the major cities. Earl